Do you know that nobody can suppress the 70 million people? That when the 70 million people determined to achieve something, nobody can suppress it. You cannot tolerate anymore all this system. Everything is collapsed. There is no administration. The people are obeying my order, not their order. Legally, I am the authority because people have voted to me.
These are the people who gave birth to the dream of Pakistan, and for 23 years watched that dream being killed by the military rulers of the Western Wing. They were denied the fruits of their labor. They were denied a voice in their own affairs. They stayed poor so that Islamabad could be rich, and with those riches, create a powerful military machine. Then in 1971, Pakistan's President, General Yahya Khan, is forced to hear the voice of the people of Bengal expressed for the first time in their history in a free election. They vote overwhelmingly for Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and the Awami League Party. The Bengalis do not realize the terrible price they are about to pay.
I can tell you one thing. Nobody should play with the fire. Nobody should try to suppress the 70 million people. When they're determined to achieve something, nobody can suppress them. Today, tomorrow, or day after tomorrow, they must win. Victory is ours.
Bangladesh was bought with blood. March 1971, the year of the killing, begins. While Yahya Khan and the politicians of the West pretend to negotiate with Mujibur Rahman, the Pakistan military machine prepares to crack down. By ship and secret airlift, troops are brought to Dhaka. General Tikka Khan, popularly known as the Butcher, is sworn in as military governor. On the night of March 25th, the army moves to crush Bengal. The army is indiscriminate in its killing. Tank guns are used against these dormitories in Dhaka University. Surviving students and professors are made to dig their own graves before the army shoots them. Religion has no meaning to the army. Bengali mullahs are bayoneted in their mosques. Bengali Christians and Buddhists are shot. This was Dhaka's largest temple. The army reduced it to a pile of rubble after machine gunning all the people inside. Terror and violence become the order of the day in East Bengal. And the reign of terror continues. Dhaka becomes a charnel house. Within days of Tikka Khan's appointment as military governor, whole areas of the city are obliterated and the people burnt to death. The army acts on one conviction, that to be a Bengali is to be a traitor to Pakistan. The Pakistan army fans out across the countryside, looting and killing. And with each new atrocity, the ranks of those who are prepared to fight the army grows. They call themselves the Mukti Bahinis, the freedom fighters of Bengal.
The Punjabis were here and they took position against the Liberation Army. From here, and they fired the 3 inches mortar from here, and they killed so many innocent Bengali Liberation Army and the innocent Bengali people of the citizens of this town. We resist them with our weapons. And just at 4 a.m., they retreat from here, and when they retreat, they burnt all the houses of the innocent people, innocent Bengali peoples, and killed brutally to them through their bayonets and through fire.
These women were killed after they had been raped by Pakistani soldiers. When their father tried to prevent the rape, he was bayoneted to death. East Bengal becomes a giant graveyard. White settlers flee, carrying to the world tales of torture and wholesale murder.
I saw killing. I saw shooting. I was sitting in the middle of the house while they were shooting just outside the windows. It was under control of the army. And after they gained control, I must tell you, they burned on the bazaar districts, where they had no possibility to search thoroughly, so they just burned it up.
The Air Force is sent in with Sabre jets to strafe and terrify the population. By the middle of April, it seems that the Pakistan army has won. Mujib is in prison in West Pakistan. The Muftis are in disarray. But in the remnants of the liberated zone, Awami leaders raise their flag and declare Bangladesh an independent country. For those who survived the Pakistan Army's pacification techniques, but are too young or too old to fight, the only alternative is escape. Millions flee from Yahya Khan's soldiers and cross the border into India. This is to become the greatest migration of people the world has ever witnessed. In the hastily improvised camp set up by the Indian government to care for the waves of refugees, the Bengalis encounter more death. Cholera is the new enemy. Mothers who have fled for the sake of their children watch them die in the refugee camps. The rich nations of the world promise help. Only a fraction arrives, and so the dying in the camps goes on. And the killing in East Bengal continues.
On the night of May 29th, the Pakistani soldiers broke into our house. They took my father outside. A little while later, I climbed up to the roof. I saw my father lying in the front yard. They had shot him.
General Farman Ali, military advisor to the governor of East Bengal.
We are a very well-disciplined army. We are proud of this fact. I deny this accusation of atrocities on the Pakistan army.
Mufti commanders disagree.
The village, they burn it. No matter how many people are living in that area, they just kill them. At places, they surround the area with gasoline and set it on fire. And any people that come out, they shoot them.
Peace and normalcy, as far as physical side is concerned, exists. However, the minds of the people have to be won back, and the hearts of the people. We are making efforts every day. But it is such a thing that so much depends on the propaganda, violent and malicious and lies which emanate from India, that it becomes very difficult for us to bring back this, normalcy in the minds of the people.
Whatever the Pakistani generals say in Dhaka, the ever-swelling ranks of the Mufti Bahini are slowly becoming an effective guerrilla army. Students and peasants join in learning jungle warfare. Early training is done without arms or with substitutes such as these bamboo poles. The most promising of the recruits are then trained in the use of firearms by the regular Bengali officers who defected from the East Bengal Regiment and the East Pakistan Rifles. Camps like these multiply throughout Bangladesh. Bengali nationalism acquires a new dimension. The rumors of increasing guerrilla activity demand explanation. In July, President Yahya Khan gives his first press conference since the massacre began.
Perhaps due to the monsoons, because they had declared aim actually that they would increase it during monsoons. And I think they have done so a little more. But they find that the army is more alert in monsoons than in normal times. It's a question of who moves first. Whenever the army has the news that a certain village is being persecuted, being fired at, being grilled by these guerrillas, army reaches there. Well, army can't reach everywhere. So what is happening really is that the people themselves are now organizing village defense.
The Bengalis were helping the Mufti Bahini. The army in reply creates a paramilitary organization to help them, the Razakars. But many of these also defect to the guerrillas. While the world's press discuss the guerrillas, for India the refugee explosion continues. Indira Gandhi and her government repeatedly tell a deaf world that the refugees are not pawns in a political game. For India, there is no forgetting that the problem concerns the lives of millions of people, those who have fled and those who are still being massacred across the border in Bangladesh.
One down.
With the monsoons in full force, Bangladesh has become ideal guerrilla territory. The Muftis know their country and its waterways. They have the edge over the Pakistan soldiers. When the army comes out of its barracks, it is forced to adopt guerrilla tactics to fight the guerrillas. Now whole areas are under the flag of Bangladesh. Foreign papers carry news stories datelined Mujibnagar. This is the name given to every town and village which comes under guerrilla control. In these areas, life assumes a normal face, despite the presence everywhere of armed Mufti soldiers. This town, well inside Bangladesh, is filmed by American journalists in August, who report that there is a town administration, schools, courts, and even a newspaper. The town is self-supporting. It places a tax on the major crop, jute, with which it finances all its civil and some of its military activities. It also has a hospital where refugees from the army terror receive aid and care from their own people. In Mujibnagars like this, mushrooming all over Bangladesh, even children become soldiers for the cause. This is another guerrilla town, filmed by British journalists in September. In armed camps all over Bangladesh, men train for the liberation of their country. But the courage of the Bengalis is no match for the Pakistanis, who are still being armed with modern weapons by China and the United States. Henry Kissinger, Nixon's foreign expert, comes to India to explain the inexplicable, that America will not condemn Yahya Khan's brutality. Kissinger goes from Delhi to Islamabad and from Islamabad to Peking, illustrating the line American policy will follow. In the United Nations, Pakistan accuses India of causing famine in Bengal.
By indulging in sabotage of food ships, India is trying to create conditions of famine for 75 million people of East Pakistan to fulfill its own political objectives. If the international community is genuinely concerned about possible food shortage in East Pakistan, it has an obligation to prevent India from indulging in activities which, if unchecked, cannot but endanger the sustenance of the people of East Pakistan.
But outside Dhaka, Bengal's most heavily fortified city, the evidence of effective Bengali, not Indian, sabotage techniques is plainly visible. Although a civilian governor has been appointed, the army still controls the province. With each new guerrilla success, the tension in Dhaka grows. Bengali shops fly Pakistani flags or even display pictures of Yahya Khan as insurance against army reprisals. In broad daylight on the main streets of Dhaka, civilians are stopped by soldiers and searched for arms. The army has begun to feel threatened by the guerrillas it once dismissed with such contempt. And the army has reason to feel threatened. In the heart of Dhaka, guerrilla sabotage units carry out a daring raid on the film section of the Pakistani administration's information office. With increasing frequency, Dhaka is rocked by explosions from bombs planted by Mukti saboteurs. The Bengalis have at last begun to win the psychological war against the Pakistan army. The once crowded rivers of Bengal are now empty of commercial traffic. This is the third front of the liberation struggle. Apart from armed conflict and psychological warfare, the Mukti Bahini have declared a policy of economic strangulation so that the rulers of West Pakistan will be forced to capitulate to Bengal's demands. The Pakistan army increases its vigilance over the great rivers of Bangladesh, the Padma and the Meghna. But too many people have fled into India. Too many boats have been shelled or burned. The traders who are left behind are frightened to venture onto the rivers. The refugee concentration in India has now reached the 8 million mark. It is India's hard-pressed economy that is paying $1 million a day for food and shelter. And it is India's poor who most keenly resent the injustice of so much money being spent on foreigners. In a desperate attempt to disperse the refugees, the Indian government takes thousands to inland camps. But for every group of refugees evacuated, there is another trainload to take their place. Even though they are paying for the world's indifference, Indians do not forget the tragedy of Bengal. Months after the first refugee exodus, Indians are still collecting money for the victims of the army crackdown, and still hoping they will be given a chance to go back. The Indian position is explained by the Chief Secretary of West Bengal, who has had to deal with the presence of over 4 million refugees in his state alone.
These camps are being segregated from the local population. We regard them as the inmates as foreigners. We do not want them to get assimilated in the locality. So they have great difficulties. They are all living this kind of community life under the same tarpaulin. And I'm sure if you give them the facilities to go back, they will go back.
My message of amnesty and my message of asking them to come home has not been conveyed to them. First. Second, my borders are troubled, not by me, but by my neighbor. Shelling by field guns, mortaring by mortars. Activities by infiltrators, armed infiltrators across the border are continuing. I would like to know which displaced person, civilian, would like to cross that border under those conditions.
President Yahya Khan forgets that civilians are crossing the border, but not in search of amnesty. They brave the crossfire in order to escape from East Bengal and the continuing brutality of the Pakistan army. In the West, the Pakistani people are not aware of the disastrous results of Yahya Khan's policy of genocide in Bengal. The demand for war with India grows daily.
I'm not looking for war. I'm trying to avert it by showing a lot of patience. But there's a limit to our patience too. So we're very close to it. I'm equally going to make it very clear that the war is forced on us through a means of some action in East Pakistan. An attack on East Pakistan is an attack on Pakistan as a whole.
But it is Yahya Khan who unleashed the war in Bangladesh. An unequal war in which soldiers are pitted against children. And it is the mothers of Bengal who wear the face of patience and of despair. They watch their children, those who have survived the journeys and the cholera, waste away from the slow death of protein malnutrition. Experts predict that hundreds of thousands of children will die within months. Those children who survive will be physically and mentally retarded for life. The foreign press, international statesmen, writers, musicians, and thousands of ordinary people champion the cause of Bangladesh, but their governments remain indifferent. A British relief worker in the refugee camps says,
I cannot really believe that the world is being so silent and so complacent about an issue which must be, in anybody's book, the worst kind of disaster that's been experienced. So I just sitting and seeing this happen, one just doesn't know who to appeal to. I mean, who do you ask next to come and see this, come and report this, come and do something about this? One doesn't seem to get the impression that the world is really aware. However much has happened, one seems to think that they've closed the book on the refugee situation in West Bengal and are now waiting for the next disaster to rouse them to do something.
You've spoken of the first...
In November, the Indian Prime Minister tours the world to explain again the gravity of the situation. In capital after capital, she pleads the Bengali cause. In London, she is asked what can be done to stop the refugee exodus.
Well, surely that the massacre there stops, the rape stops, the burning of villages stops.
Can it not be fairly put to you that you're contributing in a way to the exodus of the refugees by your support for the Pakistan guerrillas? Now, mustn't you, in effect, face the question of having to reduce your support for the guerrilla armies operating in East Pakistan?
Does that mean we allow a massacre to continue? What happened first? How many people were killed according to your correspondence of British newspapers, of American newspapers, of French newspapers, Canadian newspapers, Arabian newspapers? The massacre began long before there was a single guerrilla.
But it's a contribution to quietening the situation, as I say.
No, what does quietening mean? Does it mean that we support the genocide? And do you think it can be stopped? Do you think people are going to sit aside and watch their women raped in front of them? And say that, no, we are going to quieten the situation? That's not quietness. That is the worst possible type of war. It's the worst possible type of violence.
But how then, without something done to control the guerrilla activity in return for greater discipline by the Pakistan army, can you secure these first steps?
When Hitler was on the rampage, why didn't you say, let's keep quiet and let's have peace in Germany and let the Jews die, or let Belgium die, let France die? Would you say that was quiet?
But how do you propose to bring about these first steps to control the exodus?
It's not for us to. This would never have happened if the world community had woken up to the fact when we first drew their attention to it.
The guerrillas are hardly amenable to suggestions about quietening the situation. Now they are fully organized into specialized groups. They begin to move out of the villages and into the urban areas. But they still cannot withstand the weapons of the Pakistan army.
One note! One note! 1,000!
Situation created by the Indian aggression is leading the two countries to a point of no return. I would like to make it absolutely clear that we shall defend our honor. We shall defend our territorial integrity with all the forces at our command.
India displays Pakistani arms and tanks captured on Indian territory, but the world continues to regard India as the aggressor. For 9 months, India has pleaded the cause of the people of Bangladesh who were being massacred because they had no army to defend them. Now India is accused of expansionist aims because her arms are larger than Pakistan's. While the weapons were being displayed, the Pakistan army shelled the nearby town of Balurghat in West Bengal, and foreign journalists are given tragic proof that Indian civilians are dying as a result of Pakistani shelling. Within hours of that attack, Pakistani bombers strafed the capital of Tripura, 1,400 miles away. The attack is taken up by heavy artillery fire from Pakistani guns on the border, and an Indian village suffers death and severe casualties. In India, the demand for retaliation grows, but the Prime Minister continues to counsel restraint.
The very gravity of the situation demands that we do not speak or act in anger or in haste. It is a time for alertness, not only of our defense forces, but of all our people. In the last few months, the world has witnessed the courage, dignity, and self-restraint with which we have faced this challenge. I am sure that you will meet all future dangers in the same spirit.
The Prime Minister is addressing a rally in Calcutta when she hears the news. Pakistani planes launch a preemptive airstrike to paralyze the Indian Air Force. It fails. And in Delhi, the Prime Minister declares that India has no option but to put itself on a war footing. Yahya Khan calls for a jihad. Jihad in this war means the capture of northern India. Around Sham on the western sector, the fiercest land battle of the war develops. For every Pakistani soldier and tank that attacked India in 1965, this time there are 3. The area is taken and lost by Pakistan, lost and recaptured by India. In the eastern sector, the war of liberation gains momentum. Thousands of miles away, another battle rages in the United Nations. Hung Hua, leader of the Chinese delegation, attacks the Soviet Union. The Russians veto an American resolution supported by China, calling for immediate ceasefire. Despite the war of words, the Indian army makes rapid advances in the east over difficult terrain. The Indian objective is to relieve Dhaka as quickly as possible. The strategy, to strike simultaneously from all directions, isolating and outflanking the heavily fortified Pakistani positions in major towns and garrisons. Pakistan's generals cannot counter Indian maneuvers. Tanks and troops strike with speed. At the United Nations, India demands that the world listen to the elected leaders of Bangladesh.
Because we cannot.
Pakistan still ignores the political realities, and for the second time in 24 hours, the Soviet Union uses her veto to squash a ceasefire proposal because the proposal denies the political crisis of Bangladesh. From the Indian Navy, Admiral Nanda demands that no supplies reach Pakistan's war machine. In the west, a daring raid on heavily defended Karachi harbor. In the east, an effective naval blockade. December 6th, India makes a final commitment to the people of East Bengal. Bangladesh is recognized. The Lok Sabha cheers as Mrs. Gandhi introduces Humayun Rashid Chaudhry as His Excellency, the Ambassador of Bangladesh.
Madam Prime Minister, you are not only the leader of the great people of India, you are the leader of the people of Bangladesh. You are not only a leader of the subcontinent, but you are the leader of mankind.
As Pakistan loses territory in Bengal, it intensifies its attacks in the west, but it cannot achieve the desired breakthrough, unlike Indian forces in the other theater.
Pointing the guns towards Kulna. Don't attack the tanks. After the tanks, 2,000 yards to 3,000 yards, you'll find on the port and starboard side enemy concentration. Point for those. We are flying towards Jessore now.
The land battle in the east proceeds. The air is India's, the sea is India's. Nevertheless, the eastern commander of the Pakistan Army, General Niazi, remains defiant.
I am proud of my troops, their discipline, their bravery, their tradition, and I'm sure we will be able to maintain the tradition of our forefathers, which have never lost a battle.
But 72 hours after the war begins, the liberation also begins. Garrison after garrison gives up to the Indian armed forces without firing a shot. General Manekshaw, Chief of Army Staff, sends a message to the already beleaguered Pakistani generals in Dhaka that they surrender immediately. He warns that there can be no escape either by sea or air, nor can any assistance come to them from West Pakistan. He guarantees just treatment to all military and quasi-military personnel who surrender to his forces. The West Pakistanis are kept ignorant of the situation in Bengal. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto.
Now you know what the position is. Now you know that India, a predatory aggressor, a country that has never reconciled herself to Pakistan, has committed naked aggression for the third time on the soil of Pakistan.
Despite pockets of resistance, the Indian strategy is succeeding. The army creates a ring of steel around Dhaka.
Record and target!
The few places still effectively defended by Pakistan are isolated, cut off so that the troops cannot retreat to reinforce the garrison in the capital. Pakistan's generals seem to have expected their enemies to exhaust themselves in pitched battles for secondary defended positions. But the Indians write their own rules. The objective is Dhaka. In the western sector, the fighting stabilizes. India holds her own against an enemy which seems strangely determined to refight the campaigns of 1965. The world's military strategists wonder at the Pakistani general's lack of drive and initiative.
Keep on listening, Rod. Out. Manu, Tuko.
The Indian troops march relentlessly on Dhaka. Most Pakistanis do not stand to fight. They retreat before the advance, blowing bridges and destroying communication links behind them. They make a difficult terrain yet more difficult for the Indians. But these setbacks are temporary. Modern equipment cannot be easily halted by obstructions. PT-76 tanks, using their propellers, ford the rivers of Bangladesh, ignoring the blown bridges. The Indian Navy matches the Army's success. The Western Fleet establishes supremacy over the Arabian Sea. On the other front, the Navy sinks the Ghazi, Pakistan's largest submarine, and reduces her Navy to a handful of crippled gunboats. Air attacks destroy the morale of the Pakistani garrison in Dhaka. Sortie after sortie flies unchallenged over the city. Indian fighters strafe Dhaka airstrips to prevent last-minute rescue attempts. The bazaars and main streets of the city lie empty. Powerless to solve the crisis, the United Nations Secretary-General, U Thant, appeals for a chance to evacuate civilians from Dhaka.
I now appeal to all the parties to the conflict, no matter what their allegiance, to take every possible measure to spare the lives of the innocent civilian population which is afflicted and threatened by the present hostility.
3 times India agrees to a bombing halt, and 3 times the Pakistanis refuse. Finally, on the 12th of December, Hercules transport planes touch down on the city's crater-marked runway. While Indian guns lie silent, 450 foreign families have flown out of Dhaka. At the same time, the Navy suspends its attacks in the west to allow neutral ships to leave Pakistani ports. But for the Bengalis themselves, there are no evacuation aircraft. To go into the countryside is to risk being caught in the crossfire. To remain in Dhaka is to face the inevitable chaos of a crumbling military machine. General Farman Ali requests U Thant for safe conduct, but Yahya Khan, secure in Islamabad, demands that the request be ignored. In the United Nations, the Foreign Minister, Sardar Swaran Singh, hears America accuse India of aggression. But America's moral posture seems hollow to India as the nuclear-powered 7th Fleet of the United States moves into the Bay of Bengal.
But in defiance of this expression of world opinion, India again said no. They continue to prefer the use of force to peaceful means. India, which over the years has sought to reflect in and outside of this chamber the moral force of the world, the very precepts for which its great leaders, Gandhi and Nehru, stood, is now disregarding the Charter of the United Nations.
This one-sided and partisan attitude of the distinguished representative of United States of America has shocked and surprised us. The U.S. is entitled to its own opinions and interpretations. So are we. But facts are facts and must be stated. Right from the beginning of this unfortunate situation that has arisen in the subcontinent, India had been asking for a political settlement acceptable to the elected and acknowledged representatives of the people of Bangladesh.
In Delhi, anti-American feeling reaches a crescendo as America cuts off economic aid to India. Indian planes rocket attack Dhaka's military installations. The panic-stricken governor of East Bengal resigns. An eyewitness report by a British journalist.
I got there after the first raid on the governor's house, which half destroyed the residence. Then I got there just after that. I found the governor in the bunker, in the guard, trembling like a leaf and saying, I didn't quite know whether to resign. Should I resign? Will my wife be killed by the Indian Army? Can I get at the Intercontinental Hotel? As we were standing there in this bunker, suddenly there was another raid. And all hell broke loose. There was an enormous crash, and hardly the crash died down, but the governor suddenly produced a ballpoint pen, scrap of paper, a few carbons, and written out a resignation statement in a matter of seconds, just in time actually for the second big crash.
The noose around Dhaka is drawn tighter with the help of the Indian Air Force's helicopters. It takes 72 hours for the helicopters to put enough men behind Pakistani lines to capture Sylhet. Now the choppers drop troops onto the very outskirts of Dhaka. The engineers of the Indian Army provide instant mobility by building bridges as fast as the Pakistanis can blow them up. The hallmark of the Indian campaign is the complete coordination between the service wings. On the eastern front, the Mukti Bahini provide military intelligence and ancillary offensives. On the western front, Rajasthan, Longewala. A meticulously mounted tank, air and infantry operation regains territory taken from India at the start of the hostilities. All over the west, the Pakistanis are being dislodged. In some places, they are driven hundreds of miles into their own territory. Dhaka is now within the range of the Indian artillery. General Manekshaw once again requests General Niazi of Pakistan to surrender the city before there is further and unnecessary bloodshed. But Niazi still refuses.
We fight it out to the last. But a lot of men might die. It's the price of the freedom. But what freedom? Not yours. It's mine, yes, my country, Pakistan. You still consider that you stand a fighting chance of... stay, yes, inshallah it will stay.
Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, now Foreign Minister of Pakistan, is also defiant. In the UN, he declares his country will fight to the end.
It is disgraceful to my person and to my country to remain here a moment longer than necessary. But I am not boycotting. Impose any decision. Have a treaty worse than the Treaty of Versailles. Legalize aggression. Legalize occupation. Legalize everything that has been illegal till 13th or 15th of December 1971. I will not be a party to it. We will fight. We'll go back and fight. My country hearkens for me. Why should I waste my time here in the Security Council? I will not be a party to the ignoble surrender of part of my country. You can take your Security Council. Here you are. I'm going.
As the Pakistani delegation leaves the chamber, Chittagong falls to an amphibious attack. December 16th, Pakistan units begin to surrender. Amir Abdullah Khan Niazi, martial law administrator and commander of the Pakistan Eastern Command, offers unconditional surrender to General Jagjit Singh Arora, commander of the combined Indian and Mukti forces in the Eastern Theatre. General Arora flies to Dhaka to accept the surrender. Strict military protocol is observed at the racecourse, where the instrument of surrender is signed. It is 4:31 in the afternoon. 90,000 Pakistani soldiers become prisoners of war. But on the Western Front, the guns are not silent. In the United Nations, despite the continued boycott of the Pakistani delegation, Sardar Swaran Singh announces a unilateral ceasefire.
We have repeatedly declared that India has no territorial ambition. Now as the Pakistani armed forces have surrendered in Bangladesh and Bangladesh is free, it is pointless in our view to continue the present conflict.
We are here to salute the high ideals for which this country has stood and which has brought forth the best in our people in all channels of difficulty. All the world admires a deed well done, and I think with all modesty we can say that we have done this action well.
For the people of West Pakistan, the news of defeat is a bombshell. They have been told they were winning a war. Now the war is lost. Revenge, a new war with India is the demand. But also there is a deeper sense of loss and bewilderment. Pakistan Radio broadcasts the songs of exile. The soldiers and the Razakars are treated as the murderers of Bengal, but they are not alone. 132 nations subscribe to the United Nations, to its ideals of justice and human worth, its pledge to redeem mankind from the scourge of war. And through the long months, 132 nations stood silent. In Dhaka, a shallow grave is found. In it are buried over 200 leading Bengali intellectuals.
He was picked up from his house on 15th December by a half a dozen all-weather paramilitary force under the army command.
Why should they have killed so many of these people?
So far, we gathered during the last phase of the present armed struggle. They prepared a list of the intellectuals, journalists, professors and teachers, and they picked up at least 250 intellectuals, journalists and professors during the last 15 days between 1st of December to 15th of December. They thought that they are the sole enemy because these people were the intellectuals and brain of the Bengal.
In liberated Bangladesh, the remains of Bengali women, once brutally used by the Pakistan army, lie unburied. War leaves not only the dead, but the wounded. And India, as well as Bangladesh, must count the cost. In every hospital, the cost can be seen. In the eastern sector alone, members of the armed forces killed in action, 3,037. Wounded, 7,300. Missing, 1,561. And now, across the border in the new nation of Bangladesh, the administration elected by the people can at last take up its duties. The first official to set foot in Dhaka as the capital city of the 8th largest nation on earth is Abdul Khalik, Inspector General of Police. He is given an overwhelming reception. Mahmoud Nazrul Islam, the acting president of Bangladesh, returns. Tajuddin Ahmed, the Prime Minister, is with him. Awami League officials and ministers of the Bangladesh government arrive in Dhaka to take up office. Only one man is missing, still held by the Pakistanis. The misfortunes of war have given Bhutto the power in Pakistan, which was denied him in the elections. He is now president. Before a crowd of over 100,000 people assembled in Karachi, he admits the necessity of releasing Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. The joy that had greeted the returning leaders of Bangladesh reaches its climax. On Monday, January the 10th, thousands of Bengalis thronged the streets of Dhaka. Before a corps of foreign diplomats, the people of Bengal await their leader. Officers of the Mukti Bahini and the Indian Armed Forces act as a guard of honor. The entire Bangladesh cabinet is in attendance. After 10 months, Mujib is home. Republic Day, and India pays homage to her dead. Dead in a cause not directly her own. Dead so that the killing in Bangladesh should stop. Dead so that the world should remember what the year of the killing had cost.
আমার সোনার বাংলা আমি তোমায় ভালোবাসি চিরদিন তোমার